Welcome to Startup Jab.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 30. That's right, episode 30 of Startup Jab. I am one of your two hosts, Jason Ellis. With me, as always, the raspberry to my strawberry, Teague Hopkins. Teague, how are you, sir? That's a perfect answer. We, for the first time in a little while, are doing a new Blab show. So for those of you listening via podcast, if the sound and the audio challenges are a little bit new again, don't worry. We're going to smooth them out, I promise. But in the meantime, we are thoroughly excited to have our guest this week, the gentleman behind Wolf 359. Teague, first things first, introduce our guest. I think you can really do this justice better than I can.
So Gabriel and Zach are the creators of the award-winning Wolf 359 podcast. The addictive Wolf 359 podcast. I will admit that I have listened to the second and to the entire second season in the last 2 weeks. After being a little slow on the uptake, but I'm getting with the program. And they've just started the third season on Valentine's Day. It was the first episode of the third season went out. So we're excited to talk to them about their journey so far and a little bit about their plans for the future. Thanks for joining us, guys. Uh-oh, I can't hear you now.
Yeah, something happened. Did you guys mute yourselves? Did you switch the wrong microphone source? Uh-oh.
Oh, dear. All right, I'm going to pause this for a second. And we're back, having solved some technical difficulties. So welcome back to the show.
Great to be
here. Yeah, as Gabriel said, plus 20 sanity points for solving this problem and realizing that there actually was a cause to the technical problem. It wasn't simply that we were all hearing a random echo.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how you guys started Wolf 359. And also, is it Wolf 359 or Wolf 359?
It depends on who you ask. We have always called it Wolf 359.
Yes.
Apparently, other people use this star in other media. Some people have called it Wolf 359. Some people have called it Wolf 359. Some people have called it Wolf 359.
Yeah. 359 is probably more clinical.
Yeah.
It's a real star in our galaxy.
Yes.
Galaxy?
It is also a real star in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yes. It is also a site of a epic battle in Star Trek. It's always funny to see on Tumblr creeps into our tag. Like the Trekkies.
Like which Star Trek conversations just kind of end up piggybacking and ended up in our tag on Tumblr, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, how did it start? One day, this crazy idea for this plot about these people who were stuck on the space station just popped into my head. And I had this very clear idea of this very odd character who was just stuck monitoring a radio on a space station. And it just felt like something that wanted to be an audio drama and go on the internet. And that would have pretty much been it, except I made a fatal error by telling Facebook about this revelation.
And that's where I come in. I got this message from a mutual friend of ours that just had my name, like the way you can tag somebody on a post. And the original post read, "Looking for voiceover actor." And I was like, I'm one of those. And it sounded like a really compelling idea. It was very sketchy at the time. It was just like, I have an idea for a one-man radio show, and I'm looking for a voiceover actor. At the time, I had just signed with a commercial agency, and the idea of doing something a little bit more creative was really attractive because I was doing a lot of commercial auditions, which varied by hairs in terms of creativity.
And I think that we were also just both attracted to the idea of doing something and getting it out there quickly.
Yes.
Because I was at the time working in filmmaking in Los Angeles. You were here in New York trying to get voice acting jobs. and everything just seemed this lumbering dinosaur of, we'll have a meeting and then a follow-up and then a tete-a-tete, and then we'll maybe consider contractual drafting in order to later on lead to some pre-production, which might perhaps go into development at a later point in time.
Exactly.
And we were just like, there has to be a way to just get content done quickly in a fun way without it taking years to maybe come together.
Yeah. And,
Right.
Essentially, I hounded Gabriel on Facebook Messenger for a couple weeks until he coughed up a pilot script for me to read. And I think my only piece of feedback was, this is great, and I wouldn't listen to it because there are so many great characters that are happening off screen that I want to hear. And that's when we, I think the Wolf 359 that we know and people are sharing about today came into being, or at least, conceptually.
Sure. So it started. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, T. Can you guys speak a little bit to your creative influences? I mean, as you're pulling the script together and you're starting to think about it conceptually, did you go back to old radio dramas like The Shadow or, the old Buck Rogers or that kind of stuff?
Man, I haven't listened to The Shadow since I was a kid. That's awesome. I love that. I love The Shadow.
That was part of my homework.
There was a lot of that. I grew up listening to a lot of radio dramas as a kid, sort of like those really, really old school ones from the 1940s and 50s, which have since lapsed into public domain. I remember one day I discovered some websites online that just had all of them, and it was basically like finding this compendium of 200 awesome movies that you can listen to for free. And there went many, many weekends of my life. The main ones I think that I was kind of thinking back to when I was thinking about Wolf 359 were this show called Escape. And the main premise of Escape was that it would always start off with these people who, in one episode, they would be in this lighthouse in the middle of an ocean with no way to make it out. And then another one, they were on a plane and they crashed into the Himalayas and they were trapped there. And then another one, they were trapped in a submarine that had lost power. And it was always this show about these people who were in these situations from which there was no escape. And they were just super dramatic and bombastic about it. And I was listening back to a lot of those stories when I was thinking about making a show about people who were stuck on a space station and who were isolated and cut off from everyone and from places where there was no escape. I think that Escape was the main thing that I was going back to and listening as I was trying to figure out how the show would come together.
And as an audiobook junkie and a sci-fi fan, it was a very natural fit for me. Coming into this world of, just like very reminiscent of the sort of farscapes of the world. Yeah. And I had grown up listening to Jim Dale like an addict, just like, pull off over 300 original voices for the Harry Potter series. And so the idea of getting to play two characters was really attractive for me, especially somebody with a American accent. Which is not something that you really get the chance to do in commercial
voice acting.
New York City.
You don't often get like Russian scientists trying to sell you hot dogs.
You should drink us. Do you not? Wait. Beer drinks you.
So take us back to the very, very beginning of the show. So Gabriel is living in California. Zach is in New York, recording, in your closet, right? And you're yeah, excellent. So you're creating this thing out of nothing. You're putting it out there. What kind of reception were you expecting, and what did you find, and like, how did the first episode or two that you put out there, what was the experience of that?
That's a really good question. I think that we went into it with basically no expectations in terms of reception. I love a lot of podcasts, and Lord knows that half of my podcast list is things like Radiolab that half of North America is listening to, and the other half of it are things that I think I am one of a dozen people that listen to that show. Like even the host's mom and dad haven't quite gotten around to listening to them yet. And some of those are my favorite shows. So I remember just thinking, if that's all we ever are, if we're something that 5 people listen to, as long as we are something that we enjoy doing, it'll be fine. And I think that was a good approach, because for the first couple of episodes, it definitely was 5 people listening, and that was it.
Yeah, we were really focused on making something that was something we would be proud of, that we would want to listen to. And we're very much focused on that creative self-expression. And it's only very recently that we've sort of like feeling like we have that down, or at least, we've only very recently sort of pivoted our attention to growth and seeing how many people would like this.
And with that said, a lot of what was great about that first season, when it was basically our moms listening, was that it gave us a lot of freedom to just experiment and throw things at the wall. Because anyone, but especially me, will tell you that I think that it took us about 10 episodes to really figure out how the show worked and what it wanted to be. Right. And it was great to be able to do that without immediately getting an avalanche of tweets and reviews on iTunes, just kind of being,
WTF.
Yeah, what is going on here? And likewise, our first website definitely needed thinking out and sort of like reimagining a little bit. There was just a lot of things where our philosophy was, let's put things out there, let's see what works, and then let's go back and polish.
Yeah.
And being able to do that with a small audience of mostly people that we knew.
And it's like yes and no. If we were really firmly in that mindset, it would have stayed a one-person show and been recorded in my closet. But we got really
and it would have lasted 4 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. and that's the thing, is I think we got really clear that like we do want to get things out there as quickly as possible, with like it needs to be this
a certain level of quality, right?
Exactly. And so that's where we
Sure.
in our friend, one of my friends, and just a really stand-up audio engineer, Jared Paul, who, and just TLDR, this entire team is a bunch of people who went to the same college. I can't say we were college friends because we weren't friends in college.
Right.
But we all sort of had creative crushes on each other. And so we've slowly looped different, people in over the 2 years that we've been doing it. So Jared hooked us up with some studio time. I think I had gotten him some work with a friend's feature film, so he owed us a solid, and it was just a great guy, and gave us a sort of friends and family rate.
There's definitely a lot of the first, say, 6 episodes that were built on, hey, I did this guy a solid once.
Yeah.
And now they're going to come help us out with this recommendation, or sort of getting our name out there, or just like hooking us up with this person that might want to act.
Yeah.
Very much the beg, borrow, and steal model.
Very much so. Very
100%.
much so.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple questions from the audience here that we'll take.
Sure.
So first off, Scott asks, what sort of budget is there for individual episodes?
Great question.
It varies. And the main factor that will cause an episode to balloon in budget is how sound effect intensive it is. Because very early on, I realized that we could record people very well, but we did not have the Foley skills or the time and energy to kind of be figuring out, if we join like aluminum with this particular kind of pen, we can create this whatever thing. So most of
submarine sounds is something that really works for a creaky old spaceship.
Exactly. And so the vast majority of the and by this I mean 99.9% of the sound effects for the show are all licensed from media marketplace sites.
Mm-hmm.
And so with something that is an episode where they are fighting some mutant creature and there are a lot of actions and there's a lot of guns and explosions and weird animal sound effects, then the budget can really spiral upwards. Yeah. And usually after that episode, you'll notice that the next episode is And in this episode, 3 characters talk for 22 minutes quietly while sitting in chairs, very still.
Right. The Wolf 359 version of a bottle episode is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But between studio time, sound effects, licensing, and just kind of like regular server and maintenance things.
Snacks, don't forget snacks.
Snacks are part of it for our actors and our personnel.
Printing scripts.
Printing scripts. I would say that most episodes cost somewhere in the neighborhood of between $150 and $300.
Yeah, with exceptions going up to 5. And I think the other big driver of cost is, especially now that one of our actresses doesn't live in New York City, additional studio time, where previously we would be able to get 2 full episodes in the can in a 3 or 4 hour recording session. Sometimes now we need 6 hours, depending on what people's availability are.
And it's funny because costs have been going up in the show, and sometimes we sort of tell people these numbers and they're scandalized as their jaws drop. And most of us that work on the team, we come from the worlds of film and theater, where what it costs us to make an episode is what it costs to feed half the crew for an afternoon.
So it's all context.
It's all about context. And
it's not free, and it's certainly not cheap, for 2 20-something-year-olds to cobble together. But relative to what it would cost to do this in a visual medium.
In any other visual medium.
Except for maybe a
webcomics, right.
But even then, costs could go up really quickly. And audio, I think, has been a really attractive medium for us for just that reason.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so how are you guys paying for these costs?
Out of pocket, pretty much, yeah.
You basically just it's self-funded, right?
Yes. Yeah, bootstrapped, as it were.
Indeed.
Like every good startup.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's like we were really clear from day one that we wanted to put something out in the universe that people could look at, and and we could really establish ourselves. I know for Gabriel as a writer and an aspiring showrunner, no longer aspiring, he has that credit. And similarly, like as the lowly.
Ooh.
Are we still on?
We might not be on.
I do.
I hear you guys. Suddenly
Great.
all the video disappeared.
Yeah, I just was waiting for it. I don't know if you guys are recording audio. We can just keep going.
Yeah, we'll just keep going.
Well, the audience can still hear us, so let's keep going.
So like I was saying, as like the lowly, newbie VO actor that was too young to do alcohol ads at the time, I was like hungry to be, get something out there.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
You can't do alcohol ads until you're 25. And at the time, I think it was like 23, 24.
Yeah.
And so now at the time, it was like, I want to have something out there that's like, oh, get me that guy for my candy bar ad, So anyway, here we are.
Nobody sells candy.
Nice. So we're having all kinds of Hephaestus-like difficulties on this episode, but we'll power through it.
Great.
So Zach, you were just talking about some of your previous voice acting experience, and I wanted to ask you about your. You mentioned doing sensual voiceovers for an app. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
This is where I leave.
So.
Awkward.
A really good friend of mine made an introduction, like not even a month or two ago, to a gentleman starting a startup in the vein of Headspace, if you're familiar with that app, which is the premier guided meditations on your phone. And I do a mental health awareness campaign in my free time called Project Uplift, which is all mindfulness based. And so and I do voice acting, so it was a really good fit when I met Darren, who's created an app called Pillow.io, which is a website, Pillow.io, you can go to. And I am the male voice for guided sensual adventures for couples, of all things. And it's not porn or porny. It is very clinical, like warm, welcoming. Any partners can join in. It's not gendered or, you know.
For all of my constant riffing on it, it seems nothing if not exceedingly mature and tasteful and well thought out.
I'm really proud to be a part of it, and it's super fun to do. And you know, as far as like paying voiceover work goes, he's making it work for me, and I'm excited to I'm excited to meet the bank teller that I ask for a withdrawal, and they just give me a funny look. I'm like,
Someday someone's going to recognize your voice in public, and you're going to think, where do they know me from?
Yeah.
Well, so my background prior to starting a company was I was a theater kid out here in DC, and I know for a fact that the first time somebody goes, "Oh my God, you're the guy from blank," it doesn't matter if it's Wolf 359 or Pillow, you're going to lose your mind. You're going to be so excited.
Wow, that's
awesome. So I want to shift a little bit because I think that there's a couple of really good questions we're getting from our audience here that I want to make sure we address. Another individual type here asks, were there any kind of technical hurdles that you ran into that you didn't expect, and how did you deal with them? So obviously, now that you're in your third season, there must be some stories that you could share about some of the technical challenges you've experienced.
Yeah, I think the trickiest thing that we've run into in the booth is we have one remote actress who plays our computer system. And in the beginning, we were sort of recording her asynchronously and then editing it in later. And we had our best results when we would Skype her in to a recording session while we were in the studio. But that process could set us back as much as an hour of tinkering.
Yeah. I think that also just like in terms of just sheer audio technical challenges, the big one has always been how do you make it work when people are recording in different spaces, and how you make it work when people are recording with different microphones in different rooms with different sound qualities.
Right.
And it was kind of an interesting moment when we started the show where it was very much, these are the people that we want to work with. Yes. These are the characters.
How do we make it work?
And I think that the way that we eventually solved that was kind of arriving at this idea of the people that are remote will always be heard through some kind of filter.
Yeah.
Either exactly or a PA system. There will always be some in-universe reason for their voices to sound noticeably different than everyone else's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it was kind of very much like a moment of, we're going to try to turn this bug into a feature and try to benefit from the fact that the voices sound different and that there is a different quality to them.
And I see.
Well, so
I just see a related question in the side. Kayla Buckley with how do you record Emma now that she's moved? And I think you will hear her through filters. And when you don't, it's because we've either by hook or by crook gotten her to New York, or we've all gone out to Colorado, which is not going to be the case.
Never say never.
Never say never. Yeah.
Right. But let me ask this: why not, for example, find a way to have her record locally and then ship the tracks to you? Because I know that a lot of voiceover actors say that are doing, like I'm sure you might. You're in New York. There's a company in California that wants your tracks. You go in and you lay down a couple of tracks and then shoot it off to them. Why not apply the same technique to the show?
A couple reasons.
Right.
I think the most of which is that there will be slight differences, whether it's room tone, and it's the sort of thing that by the time it goes through the sort of, we call it the iTunes filter, which is just the degradation when you bounce it all out to, low res MP3.
Compression. Yeah.
People probably wouldn't notice, but we would. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, if we were all recording in like a $200 an hour, like premier national commercial voiceover booth in Midtown, probably wouldn't be as much of an issue because we just get a totally neutral recording. We're not. And it's the thing where, we'd rather cover our bases creatively than diminish the integrity of that sound for anybody who's like us would be a super nerd and notice.
Yeah.
Sure.
Plus, it's got character.
Exactly.
Right? It's not a totally flat sound. You've created the acoustic properties of the Hephaestus, and you can never go back to that, right? Or you never back up.
True.
So speaking of writing the show, another question from our audience here: is there ever a worry over writing yourself into a corner? You have the way out planned before the problem ever makes it to air?
No, man, we're awful at this. We very much are like every season finale. It really is. How horrible can we possibly make the situation, and just like how much trouble can we put these people into, and what is the single most unbearably difficult thing that we can come up with? Leave that for a month. Have absolutely no idea of what is going to happen next and how we're going to bounce back, and then a month and a half later, I'm pulling out my hairs trying to solve the puzzle of how do you get these people out of it in a way that is ever realistic. So the answer to this question is kind of a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, because no, we are fearless about the weird things that we do and making it all really big and really odd and really crazy. But we rarely ever have the next move pre-planned before we make it really weird and big and crazy.
Yeah.
So, and then there's a follow-up question here. How much, if anything, is improvised, or is it all, do you stick to the script?
That's a better one for you.
We mostly stick to the script with some exceptions. And Gabriel, I think, is one of the more generous writers I've worked with in terms of fudging lines and changing words. Just I think he's open to, and it's always been a collaborative process, the development of the characters. And so if there's anything that and he also just has a habit of writing things that sometimes might be unpronounceable, and are very smart and very witty and very true to the core of the character, but are not things that live off of a page.
Exactly, and they're all great until you actually try to say them out loud, and then you're like, oh wait, no, that is not something a human tongue can do.
Right. There is no human that's going to get their mouth around that sentence. And we work those out, usually in the first table read, if not in the rehearsal, and if not in the booth. And by that point, it's yeah, whatever, let's get going.
Yeah.
There are critical moments of, Zach, it is now time to turn the make shit up button on.
Or off.
Or off. Or off. And I think there was one line that had to be these people have serious trust issues, was really important that it be exactly that in episode 1.
In the first episode. That was half an hour.
Yeah. And then there was the Eiffel does the Lord's Prayer, which was have at it, Zach.
Yeah, that was there have been a few times when you guys have come up with great things. And I remember that one time, it didn't even say Eiffel had the Lord's Prayer. It just sort of said Eiffel screams in terror, I think is what's in the script. And you sort of on the day of the recording just kind of went, this could be something a little bit better. What if it was just the Lord's Prayer? And it was one of those things that was we were in the middle of recording. We didn't have time to come up with a good mangled version of it. So it was just kind of this, Zach, do you remember the Lord's Prayer? Kinda? Great. Just go. Just say
Kinda is close enough. It's in character.
But yeah, I would say that 80% of the shows are very solidly what's in the script. 15% of it are riffs on what's in the script and sort of slight adjustments and slight, instead of saying I cannot do that, I can't do that, those kinds of adjustments. And then there's 5% that are things that we discover in the studio.
Nice. So shifting gears a little bit, another question from our audience is about the business side of things. How do you guys plan to monetize? Do you have plans for merchandise for the show in the future? When can we all buy our Wolf 359 t-shirts?
Well, that's all the time we have. Pleasure talking to you folks.
I think before we answer this question, I think one thing that we've gotten really clear about is we are focused on making a show, and making a show we love, making a show that as many people as possible would want to listen to. And that has been our focus, and that's been one of the reasons why you haven't seen a shirt, because it takes time to make a shirt worth wearing, because we, have decided to not just write "How could dare you" on a white tee and just give, put it online for sale.
And there definitely have been times when it's been a choice between we could, say, have a 13 episode second season and get our merchandising front together, or we could have a 15 episode second season and put that on the back burner. And the choice has always kind of ended up being, it has always felt better to focus on making more and better show.
Exactly. And what's been cool is the stopgap of the fan art that's come online in Redbubble and other various merchandising stores, so that I feel like the community has really stepped up to share their affinity for the show. But that's sidestepping your question, which is we're definitely thinking about it because it's a massive burn in our pockets. It has been, I think, publicly a money-losing endeavor, with the close exception of the live show, which did lose money, but a lot less than usual.
A lot less than we were expecting or dreading,
which was great. And I think, we've thought about crowdfunding platforms. I am a huge Indiegogo Kickstarter person. I know Gabriel loves Patreon, and I think that, if we were to pick any platform, we'd probably go with Patreon. It feels like a really good fit for cultivating community.
And it feels like something that is very much a chance for us to immediately give back to people in a sort of very palpable and very immediate way.
Where a Kickstarter would be like, a one-off thing. Like, I think we have increasingly more ideas about what we would do in the way of bonus content and, just like sort of like breaking that like fourth wall, letting people into the behind the scenes more who would be interested. So we definitely have our minds on it. We don't have any specific dates or plans in mind right now. But I think you can expect in the next year or so to see something online where, we can keep this thing going.
Yeah.
Keep the Hephaestus from falling into the sun.
And I think that we did have our first piece of official Wolf 359 merchandise, which was we broke someone's mug because we scared them while they were listening to an episode, and they dropped it.
One piece of merch.
And it broke, and they sent us a message just saying, "You owe us a new mug." And we kind of went, "All right, you asked, and you shall receive."
Jumped into Photoshop, slapped something together, and it was really cool to see that pop up on Tumblr. Get to connect with one person.
That is pretty cool.
All the way in Australia.
It's a unique, one-time only exclusive.
And the best part was it came in, like the photo of the box it came in, and we had no control over this. It came in something that looked like what you would ship a human heart in. It was like huge, like sketchy, what was it, like a
styrofoam
box with like a ton of tape and like fragile.
Yeah, you could have shipped you could have fit like a bowling ball in there. Yeah. It was so unnecessary.
For like this tiny little mug.
So you've got a in thinking about doing something like Patreon, right? It's the kind of thing that also only works once you've got this great show and this great following. And I know you mentioned that Zach, you mentioned that your favorite growth hack was making a show that you love. And I think that that's a great way to look at it, and a great way for a lot of entrepreneurs. Talk to me about how the audience has grown over time. How many people listened to the first season, like when it was airing?
That's a great question. And just like, I think like the question of how it grew over time, especially more recently, like there are people in the chat box and familiar names that I think would be able to answer that question better than us, because it's definitely tumbled out of our control, predominantly on Tumblr.
I see what you did there.
But yeah, how would you say?
I would say that
getting started. My mom wasn't listening.
Yeah.
Starting out.
I would say that being generous. I think that around the end of the first season, there was maybe close to 100 people listening to the show, and I think that is being generous. I remember.
That was a good day. Like that was like a oh my god.
No. Yeah, that's not like 100 downloads in a day. That's like, we think there was like about 100 people subscribed to the show. I remember one day, for whatever reason, somebody posted about us on Reddit, and we got 300 downloads in a day. And at the time, that was
flipping out.
all of a sudden the scale of our downloads just quadrupled all of a sudden. And we had no idea what was going on. And then the next day, that kind of like post on Reddit went into one of the back pages, and we were right back to the same people listening to us. And it was just like, great. Well, that was fun while it lasted. And I think that it was really halfway through the second season, I think, is when suddenly we started to just kind of see the conversation start happening online.
It was my birthday, April 9th, 2015.
2015.
The first two pieces of fan art showed up. One was this animation, like this video game animation of a scene. And we've never seen or heard from this person again. They just like ripped the audio from the show and like used a video game engine to like record a scene.
That's amazing.
Extreme Danger Bug.
Yep.
And then an artist, Random Dragon, I believe, put up a piece, if I'm not mistaken, that. No,
there were a few before that.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a few before. I remember the one you're thinking about for your birthday, and that was an earlier artist. I can't remember their name at the moment. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I think like as far as like I remember like the first time that I got onto Tumblr there was a piece of fan art that I saw by Random Dragon that and I remember it because it's being talked about in the chat. Ruina blames Dax's art and Zach and Emma recreating it. So I saw this one piece. I thought it was hilarious. And so I, basically showed up to the recording studio with the idea that me and Emma, who plays Commander Minkowski, would like stand in the same position, take the photo. I got the shirt that said "Bye and Hella Kwai," and that was it from the fan art. And that was my first like step into the Tumblrverse that has since gotten me hooked in playing with these amazing people who have created such an incredible community around the show.
And I think that is when growth really started to happen, when the first spark of a community started to happen, and we saw ourselves interacting with it more and participating and reacting to it and feeding it. And that's when all of a sudden we kind of went from, there were like about 100 people listening to the show to, whoa, there's now kind of all of a sudden 1,000 people listening to the show over the course of a summer. And now I think that we're at a couple of thousand. And I think that really, I feel that oftentimes people feel that we appreciate our growing fandom more in terms of pieces of art that show up online or sort of reactions that we hear from people or amounts of fanfic that we see rather than sheer numbers, but it's all so interconnected. And it really is one of those things that ended up being a much better marketing campaign and a much better indicator of growth than anything that we did.
Can't control. Like that's the thing that's tough about this question. It's like there's nothing that I can say to somebody to like, that's why I say focus on making something that you love, because I think the one thing that we found is that, in our nerdy off-center taste, we're not alone. And so by making something that we love, we've inadvertently made something that other people love. And that's why I would say focus on that, because you can control that. You can't control somebody spending however much time it takes to make a piece of inspired work from your work, which I think is the best way for other people to discover something.
Well,
so just for anybody who's listening, who's, considered or made something that we've seen or made something we haven't seen, like, thank you for taking that time. It really keeps us inspired.
So
well said.
Before you guys figured out that the best growth hack was making something that you love, what are some of the other crazy things that you tried when you were doing the early?
What didn't we try?
What didn't we try? We tried all kinds of guerrilla marketing tactics when it really was just like our best friends and their cat listening to us. And I remember, we would, everything from going on various message boards and creating fake accounts and sort of doing, I hear you're looking for recommendations. Here's this awesome show that I found, and just sort of trying to artificially get that.
Totally.
and get that conversation rolling. And,
the marketer in me is crying right now.
It's terrible. It's awful. And trying to sort of like get as many things as we possibly could, pointing back to our website, creating sort of like the links in various places. We really tried to do kind of the stereotypical growth hacking thing of just like create your online presence.
Yeah.
And the effect that had was like just like no blips, no bumps, no spikes, nothing. I think that the one good thing that did come of it was that later on, because we sort of took the time to, say, create the first entry in the TV tropes that like link back to us, then that later on, like a year later, someone was able to go in there and expand upon it. So those were kind of things that paid off way, 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 way later. But in terms of like short-term growth hacks, just like completely and absolutely no results.
Yeah. And like, I don't know if you guys have seen the startup series that Stanford did with Y Combinator that's on YouTube. And I think it's Paul Graham who's like, when you hear growth hacks, replace that with BS, because there's nothing you can do other than making something that people love to have something grow. And I that really resonated with me when I heard that months after we tried all the things that we tried that, as far as I can tell, did nothing. So I think just getting clear about like as a team, I guess whether you're a startup or a podcast, like what it is you want to get better at and who it is you want to work with, and then pick a measurement that most characterizes what that you're winning that game or not. And I think for us it was, we want to see how many people are listening to this thing over time, and how many people are engaging with this thing and at what depth. And that will tell us if we're onto something or not. And I want to get better at acting. He wants to get better at writing and show running, and inadvertently I've gotten better at producing. And
I got better at bringing snacks. Yeah, that's a skill that I discovered.
Real good at snacks.
Let me just tell you.
That's it. That's where it's at.
Good snack game, hard to find in my experience. So I'm with you on that. So we have a few minutes left in the show. I want to make sure that we get everybody's questions that are in right now. So one of the questions came in asking about the fact that you guys have a lot of foreshadowing and clues that listeners will find the second time through an episode. How do you manage to put them in when they hint so far ahead? Talk a little bit about your season planning, not just episode by episode.
Our deviousness.
Yes.
Deviosity.
So
Delicious.
so it's half and half. There's definitely 2 or 3 really big plot lines that from season 1, we knew that the show was going in that direction. And I am obsessive, and once I know those things are up, I tend to really flesh out a lot of the details.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gave us the ability to put in some things here and there that are just like, when someone listens to this a year later, they're going to catch the fact that the name on this box refers back to this other person. So those are the smart and actually intelligent ones. That accounts.
And just to, like, the example of that would be the previous crew,
right?
With Fourier's journals,
right?
Being found, who's become a cult classic among the Tumblrverse, even though we've never heard from her
a single word
what her deal is.
But then the rest of the time, it really is more of I'm writing an episode and I go back to an old script and I look for something that we mentioned as a one-off detail that could come back and be paid off. Like, it is as much about looking backwards as it is about thinking ahead. And there is definitely a big part of things that we do that seem like we have absolutely everything planned out, that is actually, we just put a lot of details and don't always pay them off immediately and kind of give ourselves the ground to go back. There is a rather sizable callback in the next episode that will make it seem like we were years ahead of our time when we planted the thing line. And it's actually, I went back and I looked back at the old script and I found that one-off line. And I kind of went, wait a second, here's a gun I never fired. I can use this.
Yeah, it's a lot like that on the old Nokia phones. Snake, where it's like, the more you eat, the more tail you have to refer to. And so I think it's as much looking back as it is looking ahead as we, plant these things.
Exactly.
You look like we.
Well, here's the thing. You guys realize we're recording this show, right? This is going to get to your fans. They're going to know now. The magic's gone. The thrill is gone. You have
we like.
The truth of the matter is,
we do our best to advertise the lack of magic so many times. And we have tried so often to just be like, really, guys, we're making this up as we go along.
That's part of the magic, right?
I think the problem is
right.
A rep for massive trolling, and so it's always one of those you have no idea what we're doing, or but really we don't.
Right. No, but that's smart. Giving yourself a fertile script groundwork, I think, is really important there, and I think that you guys have found. That's a phenomenal way to ensure that lots of throwaway lines can either stay throwaway lines, or you can use them as an opportunity to bounce the characters in a different direction. I think that's yeah.
And you always want to reward repeat listens is the thing. You always want to give something to the person that takes the time to go through it again, and you want to make sure that it is something that will be fun, even if you already know how the story ends, and even if you know what the big reveal is.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of, so one of our last questions, Scott is asking, what would be your 3 top tips for someone who is just starting a scripted podcast? And may I say, it's great that we're getting it phrased this way, because usually I'm the jerk that's like, if you could go back and start over and give yourself one piece of advice, what would you give? So this is a better way to phrase that. I'm going to write this one down myself.
Cheez-Its, and more Cheez-Its.
That's right.
Or go
Pringles.
Oh my God, so much high fives. Cheez-Its.
Dig.
Lol. So I would say the single biggest thing you could do is work with people you love and define the roles really clearly early on, and have there be one person to end all debates so that you can have forward momentum and actually ship something. That's the first thing, and I'm considering that one thing.
Sure.
The team with clear roles.
That's a really good one. That took what was on top of my mind.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think that another good one is just be patient. Audio is something that we're in the middle of a renaissance right now, and there's so much press going on about podcasting, and there's so much attention being given to things that it's sometimes easy to forget that podcasting is by and by still very much a niche thing. And even a lot of people who love podcasting don't enjoy audio dramas. It's kind of like a niche part of a niche cultural movement.
Right.
So don't expect, don't expect to put something out and have everyone drop everything they're doing to go listen to it.
Especially your mom.
Especially your mom, because there's a lot of people who might really enjoy the story, but it might take them some time to kind of come around to a medium that is very rich and very rewarding, but is very much not what we're used to.
Yeah. Now she threatens me for spoilers and won't.
So yeah, just be patient. Give people the time to catch up. Give them a chance to get to the level where you're at, and just give them something that'll be rewarding when they do. Yeah. And you get the last one.
I think because you said scripted podcast, I have a lot to say about technology. Mostly don't worry about it, just ship.
Right.
But I think for the scripted part, structure.
Yeah.
Structure is so critical. It's the element on the writing side that I lean really heavily on Gabriel for. I'm much more inclined to dialogue. And so, taking the time to really make sure you're telling the story you want to tell and taking the time to structure it. And I just recommend to everyone Dan Harmon's article, Super Basic Shit, Storytelling 101. It's on Channel 101 forum. You can just Google for it, like Super Basic Shit, Dan Harmon, Storytelling 101. I don't know, you'll find it. It's copied in a couple places. And that is, I think, the single most condensed, valuable resources about story structuring that I recommend. Just go, tattoo that on your brain and go forth and succeed.
Yeah.
And the bonus track that I'll give is pay attention to what people are saying when they listen to your show. Listen to the audience reaction, be aware of it. But don't bend over backwards to please absolutely everybody. One of the best things that I ever heard about writing is that writing and receiving criticism is like partying at a bar. And, it's like if somebody walks up to you and tells you that you're drunk and you should go home, you can tell that person to screw off. If a second person walks up to you and tells you that you're drunk and you should go home, you get to tell that person to screw off. But when the third person walks up to you and is like, you are drunk and you need to go home,
that's what
you are drunk and you need to go home.
Right.
And I feel that way with a lot of things about writing, where it's like, if you put something out there and everyone on the continental United States and Argentina tells you that you've done something really terrible, maybe consider doing something about that. But if you're getting one person that is just very loudly telling you that they don't like something that you've done, that's probably okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to have every single person happy at you all the time.
In fact, if you do, you should take a look at what you're doing. I don't think you can make everyone happy.
No, you need sort of specificity and you need particularity in what you do, and that's going to inevitably make someone unhappy, and that's fine.
And
you don't get passionate fans by not being polarized.
Exactly. That also, and in the same hand, that doesn't give you permission to be a jerk to those people. Their opinion is completely valid.
Yes.
And with a lot of them, especially around Wolf 59, I think we even agree with a lot of them. And it's just not the show. To take some of that feedback would be to make a show that Wolf 359 is not. And to sacrifice the integrity of the characters and the world building. And I think, we are in it to tell a story that moves people and touches people and sometimes ruins their day.
Only sometimes.
Only sometimes.
Once in a while.
And I love things like, Night Vale that can, sort of do that and sort of split the bill with social commentary. And I think from early on, that wasn't necessarily what we set out to do. And I love how the fandom has really brought diversity into a show that on the face of it, it isn't, we don't see the people. We don't talk about those things because I think that we're very much building a roller coaster for people before we're building anything else.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that would be our advice. 3 and a bonus track.
That's good advice. Well, I think I speak for all of us here at Startup Jab when I say you guys are doing some really incredible and impressive work, and we're really excited. We're really excited to see how it continues to build and grow. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Really, thank you for coming and joining us today. This is awesome.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Cool. So if people are learning about Wolf 359 for the first time by hearing the show, where should they go? What should they check out if they're interested in hearing the shows or learning more about the work that you guys are doing?
Wolf359.fm is our website, first place. That is the portal. It'll take you to everywhere. You can download every single piece of media that we have produced right there.
And that's www.wolf359.fm. And for those who are unfamiliar, .fm, I think it's some island somewhere, but it's also kind of radio. So .fm is the website.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And you can also find us on iTunes by just searching Wolf 359. You can, we have very active communities on Tumblr and on Twitter. But the website is really the main place to start.
Yeah, and Tumblr would be wolf359radio.tumblr.com, and you can just put wolf359 with the space between the wolf and the 359 in the search for the hashtag that we're on there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks again, guys. Much
No,
appreciated.
thank you guys. This is awesome.
Cool. Teague, where can everybody find you if they have questions or want to follow up?
If you have questions about running a startup and want to talk to me about them, you can find me at teaguehopkins.com. That's TEAGUEHOPKINS.com.
There you go. And I'm available at Jason Nellis, at JASONNELLIS. And of course, additionally, you can reach out to us through the Startup Jab website, startupjab.com, where you can also subscribe to our mailing list, subscribe to our iTunes feed. Really, subscribe, I think, would be the call to action we're really going for here. I think really what we share with the Wolf 359 guys is subscribe. I feel like if we had to sum this all up in one action,
subscribe.
Subscribe.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys again. We really appreciate you joining us. Teague, as always, you're a spectacular co-host. We'll see you guys next week for a new episode of Startup Jab. And Teague, I say play us out.
You got it.
We are known and feared for our dance moves.
Mostly feared.
Like 99% feared.